How's it going?
Good. Nice to see you again, Joe.
Yeah, good to see you too. Last time I saw you, we were in Austin for Day-to-Day Texas.
Yes, the home of great tacos.
It is. Did you get the breakfast tacos there?
I did. We went almost every morning to Taco Joint, which was 10 years ago. I went there for college. And
Oh, you went to UT.
yeah, I went to UT. And it
Nice.
was Taco Joint is one of the best places I've ever had in my life.
It's good. It's real
The
good.
tacos now are they used to be 75 cents when I was back in college. And now I paid $3 for each one. So, there's that side of it, but they're still good.
400% markup. Yeah. I wonder what they were like back before tacos were popular. Maybe like quarter. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, good tacos. I used to go. I think we went to Keto's quite a bit. Quesos. That was down the street. Yeah, good place too. Yeah, for the audience, if you're ever in Austin, Texas, breakfast tacos and just tacos in general, it's kind of a great place for that. So, um, yeah, so I guess to kick things off, we can talk about tacos all day. Actually, that'd be kind of a fun podcast. But for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, nice to meet everyone. I'm Vaibhav. I'm one of the co-founders over at Boundary, and we make a programming language that makes every LLM more accurate and faster without any fine tuning. And before this, I worked at a hedge fund. I worked at Google building Face ID and augmented reality tech, and I built the HoloLens at Microsoft. And somehow I chose this sad journey of doing a startup.
That's interesting. I think I remember seeing the first time I saw you. I think it was in the elevator, and you had some D.E. Shaw sweatpants on. I was like, this guy's
They're
legit.
they're some of the best sweatpants I've ever gotten, and for our team merch, we'll be getting sweatpants because we should all wear sweatpants to work. It's fantastic.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What was your favorite project to work on out of all those, except for the one you obviously chose right now?
Honestly, each one had its own project, and the reason I moved on is just because I worked on the project and I was like, okay, cool. What's the next project I can find? So one of the things that I worked on was a real time 3D reconstruction system at Microsoft. So imagine you could scan your camera and it can build the geometry of the world around you in the computer world, so you can play games and anything else on it. Really cool tech, not really good product, but really, really fun to build out, especially the real time component. At Google, we made a similar kind of algorithm where from like your phone, you can build a 3D model of your face. That's how Face ID works, along with the models. We made that. We made that like we wrote all both of these systems were written mostly in assembly. So that was fun. Like I spent the better part of a decade just writing assembly. I always loved that. And each assembly part was written on a custom chip, so not even standard assembly. Assembly made for each custom chip, and like it's
Did you
just
have
like
to
a
design
puzzle.
the chip too, or was that already made for you?
We did influence some of the chip design in terms of like what operations we want to offer. So like adding two numbers and multiplying in one cycle
Hmm.
was sometimes like we come up with weird mathematical operations that we would just want to embed into the hardware because they're super general purpose. But I didn't do any of the actual chip design. We did influence some of the decisions and like what operations were available on the chip.
Wow, that's hardcore.
It was fun. I don't know about hardcore, but it was definitely fun. I was very lucky that this was the area of computer science I got into.
Did you know assembly before?
Mostly learned C++, and I think it's just a different way of thinking. So I had a few folks on my team that helped guide that way of thinking. But assembly is just the same thing, mostly at C++. It just has slightly more syntax.
Yeah, I was about to say. I think I did a bit of it in school, but yeah, I kind of need to program in assembly. So
Yeah, and I don't wish it upon most people, to be completely honest. And really, the interesting thing I learned about writing code in assembly, and I suspect that's true in the data world too, is it's not really about having being able to write code in assembly. We can all turn any amount of code into assembly. The real problem is the real battle you're facing is the clock. So how can you know which parts of the code are worth turning to assembly?
mm,
And it's the same with data. We have infinite data. We can spend forever cleaning all the data. How do you know which parts of the data are worth making cleaner? I think it's a similar kind of. It's really
mhm.
just time that we're
Yeah,
fighting against.
yeah, absolutely. That's super cool. Yeah, you definitely struck me as one of the keener people that I'd met at Day-to-Day Texas. I take that as a compliment for sure. Yeah, I guess we can get into a number of things. I don't know, where do you want to start? I mean, we think we kicked off a bunch of topics that we wanted to talk
Yeah,
about here. I'll let
I
you kind
think
of.
I think the thing that has been latest on my mind most recently has been what it takes to take some of these like we're all seeing like I think AI has been around now for like 2 years in like the general sense. Obviously, it's been around for a while, but in the general sense, where almost everyone has access to it, and yet we see so few tools that have actually made it to production in a way where like we're using it in a way where we trust it. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. What is OpenAI said? What they have like 300 million monthly active users as of
Mhm.
recently. So I think that's interesting. I'd be curious to know what kind of queries are being run and like what sort of if these are like civilian use cases or for people's work, right? But um, I think people are still trying to figure out like where it fits in. You know what I mean? Because it'll give you a lot of good advice, and kind of bucket advice into being, I don't know, just things you can do, paths you could take in life, paths you could take with work. A good assistant, maybe a good intern in other cases, a pretty crappy intern, as some people have described it. But yeah, I'd love to see the use cases, right? So if we're talking about developers, for example, I think most people I know are using copilots in some way, shape, or form, right? But I kind of sit back and I think, okay, if this is it,
Yeah, it
okay,
feels underwhelming, right?
yeah, I mean it does, yeah. I know it's early, so you don't want to like criticize it like it's saying it's a massive flop. I was talking to my wife the other day. She works in a traditional, you know, finance company, right? And there, she's been tasked with like trying to figure out how to incorporate AI into her work and all that kind of stuff. And so that's where I'm going to be most interested in seeing like how kind of just traditional work starts evolving with AI. Because I think people like you and me were already in the midst of this. Like it's almost boring in a lot of ways. Like you fire up ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, whatever. And you're like, okay, cool, let's do that again. And it's great. It saves a lot of time. But if this is like all that we're doing, I would definitely say it's a bit underwhelming for sure. What do you think?
I think I kind of agree in that sense. Like, it sounds like the only use case that has really, really struck a chord is either generating code or answering like questions in a chatbot. And I think part of the reason that is true is because a lot of folks, while they have a really, they might even have business use cases where they can drive a lot of revenue out of it. They just don't know what the models can do. And then there's this other problem, like models hallucinating, and having people like understand how you correct for that is a ball game that I think very few people are familiar with playing. And it's like, take a web developer back in like the 1990s, or like in the early 2000s, and like toss them to the web of today. They can't, like, they wouldn't be able to really contribute for a while. There's a lot of learning that, like, infinite scroll as a news feed was a novel concept that came up in like early 2010s. And I remember like that was an interview question people used to ask. It's like a challenging interview question of like, can you code an infinite scroll speed, infinite news feed? But now it's like every freshman in college can build that. It takes like
Right.
a couple lines of code. And I think that's the paradigm that we're going through with AI. It's not actually the models aren't capable. I think the models today are plenty good, personally. I don't even think they hallucinate too much if you use them correctly. But a lot of folks, they're just in that world of like where infinite scroll is still the problem that they're trying to solve, and they haven't realized it's a couple lines of code because they just haven't seen the pattern emerge enough.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I used to be a webmaster in the 80s and early 2000s, so I can attest that yes, it was different. I kind of think we're in the Blinky GIF phase of the web if you're going to compare timelines, where it just I think there's still a site called the worst page in the universe or something like that. It looks like that. I think that's kind of where we are right now. It's lots of Blinky GIF.
It's like a MySpace page all over it. We're like,
MySpace is pretty
yeah,
advanced. GeoCities, MySpace.
yeah,
I think MySpace in the sense where you could customize your page
yeah,
to make it just
exactly.
look like really glittery and dumb. Yeah, I think that's kind of where we are with AI right now. But I mean, this is the year of agents, supposedly, or something. I don't know, but
But
I'm curious to see where this all goes. What do you think?
I think, honestly, I think this year will be the year of agents. I think there's a lot of new technology that's coming out that's making models better. But I think usually when I talk to folks, the first thing that they have is like, do these models actually work? I mean, a lot of skeptics, especially the higher up you go in like engineering skill set, the more skeptical the person becomes. And like the more junior you go, they're like, every person I know that's 20 in college is like, I use AI for everything. I don't code gen anything, and they believe it. But every like senior staff engineer I talk to is like, no, this isn't real. And I think the reality is somewhere in the middle. But like the way I've always done is like with AI models, I think it's always useful to see rather than like talk about. So like I'll show you something that I think is interesting. I'll do something really, really basic. Like imagine you have a handwritten invoice that comes up to you and someone faxes it and you want to put it into your database. Normally you'd have like a bunch of software around this or a person. But I think today you can take all this data and put it into a database like super, super easy with no actual risk associated with it. And you can see all this data just came in. But you can kind of do it on like anything. I don't know, I have like a remote here, right? Or like handwritten text or something. And like, I don't know,
Yeah.
we'll see what this does. And when I look at the screen, I'm watching like the model do this. The model will be able to pull out very interesting concepts out of this, and I could guide it to doing more interesting things as well. But I think today's models are honestly really, really good. And this year, hopefully, some
Yeah.
companies are going to start finding out
So when you did that,
exactly.
did you have to code the for the remote, or did you just hold it up and it made the code
No, I
itself?
just held it up. Let's do something else. I don't know.
That's cool.
I got this generation wipes.
Nice brand. I'm just kidding. I never use
Yeah.
them.
And we'll see here. We'll see what it does. I have no idea. Right there.
That's ridiculous. That's
Right.
cool.
This is what I mean. I think the models are really, really, really good. And I think if more people built things like this, then I think we'll have a lot more AI this year than every other year.
Absolutely. Like what's the model running in the background?
So this is actually using an off-the-shelf model. We just rotate between GPT-4o Mini, Haiku, and Sonnet. Every time I call it, it just uses a different model. But the real magic isn't the model. The real magic
Right.
is what this is actually doing, because the model, I think, is commoditized. And what we basically did is we basically converted this to what we call BAML code. So we make BAML, which is a programming language. And then we just run the BAML code. And it just makes the model more accurate without you having to lift a finger. It's kind
Super
of
cool.
like the best analogy is like React for those that have done web development. It's not really like React code is inherently what I would say. React code isn't inherently different than HTML or JavaScript, but it expresses the same ideas, but it does it in a way that's so developer friendly that developers can express complex ideas like an infinite newsfeed in way less lines of code. And React does the heavy lifting, not the developer. We kind of do the same thing where instead of the model doing all the heavy lifting and the developer doing all the heavy lifting, we take a little bit of the burden away and we make both of them a little bit better.
What does BAML stand for?
BAML stands, I mean, is your boss around? If your boss isn't around, then a badass machine learning. But
Yeah.
if they are around, basically a made up language.
Yeah, it sounds like the other AMLs, like YAML and so forth. That's cool. Interesting. How'd you come up with this?
It was on the honest story is my co-founder and I have gone through like 12 pivots together, anywhere from like building like a live streaming YouTube, like ads on Twitch, to building like a Slack competitor, to building automated drive-throughs, almost everything. And then we realized the thing that we actually love is code. We both just love code a lot. And when this AI stuff is happening, the first thing we noticed is a lot of people were they're doing things that typically a compiler should be doing. Like in a website, if you miss a closing div, I remember back in the day, I'd miss a closing div and my whole website would break.
There's a
Uh,
lot.
exactly. And now you miss a closing div and the React yells at you before you can ship the code. You want to catch those kinds of errors. And the premise that we had is it's not the model alone that will solve all the problems. The premise is really that we, as a compiler, can solve some of these problems for you. We can add algorithms on top of the model that most developers are never going to write. Like I wrote assembly for like 10 years, and clearly I can beat the compiler in some scenarios. But also, it is really nice to have a compiler that does a pretty good job in like 98% of the other scenarios where I don't have time to go and optimize it. And similarly, the same here. Instead of asking the model for everything, we ask the model for some things. And that was really the initiation of BAML, which is what would a compiler do if it was built for
Mm,
an AI native world?
that's pretty dang genius. That's cool.
I don't know about genius, but in some ways you might say it's dumb because who's going to go out and make a new programming language in 2025?
Why would you say that?
I mean, think about yourself as a developer. It's the most beautiful thing to me is a programming language. When I first wrote Python code, like I started off learning C++, then I learned Python. Python is horrible in so many ways, but at the same time, it's so beautiful in so many ways. It expresses ideas that'd be thousands of lines of C++ code. Then I saw TypeScript, and the first time I did autocomplete in TypeScript, my like brain like exploded. I was like, how do these people make this thing?
Yeah.
And the same thing happened with like Rust when I first started using it. And my brain was going from C++ to Rust. I was like, wow, it's so elegant. It doesn't look it at first, but once you learn it, it's so elegant in the way you express ideas. And there's just so few things that have that kind of beauty that developers have created that have been adopted. So the idea of making a new one of those things that other people might love is, especially developers who hate adopting new things,
Yeah.
is probably not the wisest bet. There's not that many proof of examples of companies that have succeeded building programming languages. There are a few, and they're really, really big, but not that many.
Yeah, I think some that come to mind, like Microsoft and C Sharp, for example, or
Exactly.
Java came out of, I think, Sun,
Oracle,
Oracle.
or yeah, one of the yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have like
React.
NVIDIA with React. I think
CUDA.
Facebook blew it with React.
Oh, how?
If Facebook had built React and they had built what Vercel has built today off of React, like the whole deployment system around React, Facebook would literally own part of the web, guaranteed, because so much software is built in React today. And imagine if Facebook built Vercel. Vercel went to 100 million ARR. That's not a coincidence. And I think Facebook could have owned that. And
Interesting.
NVIDIA is another example. I think CUDA
Yeah.
is one of those things that not enough people give credit for.
Oh, I mean, it's their ecosystem, though.
Yeah, exactly. And like you get it. I've thought some people are like, it's all about the GPUs. I'm like, it's the ecosystem you build around the software,
Hmm.
backed by the hardware, and the close knit of the two that gives you the beautiful like world of writing on CUDA.
Well, for a long time, it was the only game in town. I remember when, like, 2012, we were getting GPUs for some stuff, and it was, yeah. I mean, if you're going to be doing it, you're going to be CUDA. It's how
That's
it
the
is.
rule.
So it's like, I don't know that it's really changed that much. You have some TPUs and some code you could write with those, but that's pretty
Yeah.
niche. So,
I think Mojo is trying to get into that sphere now
oh, okay.
with so Chris Latner starting his new programming language, Mojo.
Yeah, that came about a couple of years ago, and I kind of wonder what happened to it.
They're still at it. I think the other problem with making a programming language, as I'm sure the Mojo team is facing, is there's just a lot of things you have to go build. Like we have to build a syntax highlighter. We have to build autocomplete in VS Code and NeoVim and JetBrains. And there's this like roller coaster stuff is you must be this tall to ride.
Yeah,
Like a programming language is one of the tallest rides you have to ride because of the expectations again the developer has when they're even using it. It's like I'm okay with bad software. I'm okay with bad UIs. I'm not okay with bad experiences while writing my code. I have almost zero tolerance for that.
a couple of things come to mind then with BAML, for example. Why wouldn't I just have, say, I don't know,
Library.
ChatGPT or something, just like hold it up and just make a table out of this image here?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and that's usually the first thing people ask is like, why can't I just do this with LLMs? And if I
Yeah,
can do this with LLMs, why can't I just use like Python or TypeScript or something existing to go solve these
right.
problems? So I'll address both of those, and I might not do a good job at it, so because
Who
we're
knows?
still learning, but I'll try. At least our perspective. The first one is why can't ChatGPT do this? And I think the best analogy here is self-driving cars. If we were to start building self-driving cars from scratch without ever having a car in on the road, we'd built them totally differently. But because we have to interface with human drivers, self-driving cars are a really, really hard problem due to our legal system, how it has to work with it, due to how like liability works, due to how just like streetlights still have to exist and stop signs have to exist. So the problem is exponentially harder. Similarly with AI pipelines, it's not that the AI pipeline can't do things. At some point, and let's assume everything is magically AI somehow, which again isn't going to be true for a little bit, but even if it is, at some point we have existing software. To have the AI model talk to existing software, we need software. It's not like that layer has to be code. That means the AI model has to produce something that is somewhat deterministic that can be fed into that system. So even if ChatGPT could build a UI, sure. At some point, if we want to do something real, which is like save that, you would save that into a database. I need a schema that is compliant with the schema that I save and have a guarantee on that. That requires some sort of like programmatic approaches.
Yeah,
And then it's not just a matter of can the model produce the schema. It's a model of can I get static analysis in my code base to know that the schema that I changed my prompt over here and that would be an error with my database, or do I want to live in the HTML world or the JavaScript world where like I'll run it and let's see if it breaks. And that's Like that's another reason why it's not purely a model problem. The code has to be interpretable by people and models of tomorrow. And static analysis just helps with that.
Yeah, and I'm guessing when you're talking about a database, are you talking about putting data into tables, or are you using like a document store, or
Either one.
just either one? Yeah,
Like at some point, there's an API you call with some blobs that you put into it.
yeah. It's interesting. So the back end of this thing then is it flexible, or do you have a kind of a rigid schema that
So no, BAML works. BAML is a compiled language. BAML is a compiled language. So you actually write BAML files in your code base,
got it?
and then the runtime of BAML is built in Rust. So, and then what we do is, because obviously you can't write your whole app in BAML, that would be absurd. What we do is we provide interops into Python, TypeScript, Ruby, Java, Go by leveraging like for people that might know, FFI layers, so like C interfaces to each of those languages. So you still get to use mostly Python, but then you just do your LLM stuff in BAML. So it kind of is like an interface only to the LLM and like an API contract to the LLM, but except without any network calls.
Interesting. What are your thoughts on these? It feels like LLMs have been sort of changing a bit. Where like I think
Yeah.
last year it was LLMs, now it's reasoning engines.
Yeah. What are my thoughts on that? I have a
Yeah,
lot of thoughts on
and
that.
let's talk about it.
One, I think what we're really doing is the epitome of programmers are lazy. We've all done the thing where it's like, oh, I don't want to do this automation task. Let me automate it. Even though it takes me 10 minutes to do, I'll spend 4 hours automating it. I think reasoning models are basically the same of that, where I don't want to spend a lot of work on something. So instead, I don't want to write a good prompt. So I will write something and then let the model figure out the right prompt. And that's kind of what a reasoning model is doing. It's attempting to discover my prompt as I ask it things. And I think they're really useful. Like that premise of I'm lazy and I don't want to do things is why we have compilers. It's why we have computers. It's why we have almost every piece of software that exists. I'm lazy. So I think they're going to be really, really useful as they come on. And BAML should be mostly.
I was gonna say, 'cause I was wondering how much of that effort you could just offload to the reasoning engine.
So you can, but there's certain things you can't. So, and I think this is easiest to see rather than, let's see if I can screen share. So, like, I think this is usually like the first thing I ask people, which is like, have they ever seen their prompt that they feed into the model? And usually, when you write a prompt, let's see if I have a preview. Actually, I think this is easier because I don't have too many of these screenshots here, but I have some of these. Usually, when people have shown me prompts, uh, like the prompt that I've seen from people, usually looks something like this, where they have a bunch of strings. They have some if conditions that modify those strings in some way, and then they eventually call the model. Like this code is just so messy, and it's not really maintainable. And the worst part is you can't even see, like, if you had to actually see the prompt out of this, you could never find it out. You have to do some magic logging or capture the HTTP request going out of your network to actually see what is the thing the model is being fed. And to me, that's like the analogy of like when we used to write a website like this and compose it with a bunch of if conditions. And then suddenly you started using some framework like this, like React in this case that I'm showing over here on the screen. But React made it impossible for you to get the raw HTML out. You would never use React. Like, because fundamentally, when there's a bug here, you need to be able to look at the HTML and see what is the HTML that is being rendered and how do I get React to give me the right HTML. But if you're going to write an agent and this is the way you write a prompt, there's no way for you to really get the prompt out. So if you want to, what we recommend is like you write your prompts in code as you would normally, but then what we offer is like a developer experience that actually lets you see the prompt. So if you write things, you actually can see it in real time update right in VS Code with developer tooling that we can build, because if you have the syntax, you can build tooling around it. And then you can not only write the prompt, but you can actually like see all these test cases and you can build test cases here. And then you can do something really nice, which is you can actually let someone run test cases.
That's cool.
And the beauty of running test cases is a couple fold, which is one, the user can, and like now you can see that I actually have evals built into here and actually tells me like why. It's because the name is not Vaibhav Gupta. The name is an object of first and last name. So I can actually say like name.first, boom, and cursor's writing the code for me. I can run this, and like now this will pass. So I can get a really good intuition of how to modify the model because the iteration speed at which I am like running the model for my specific prompt is just way higher. I don't know if that kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The biggest thing that I saw was like when I first got into like trying to do any sort of UX design, I found design to be something that felt magical. I met all these people that are so good at design, and I talked to them, and I'd be like, "How do you get there?" And it turns out the answer was really simple. They just designed a lot of things. Like, and you design like 100 different things, you get a pretty good sense of what design is for a good variety of objects. I think prompting is similar too, or like maximizing model outputs is similar. You actually look at what you fed into the model and what you got out of the model thousands of times. You get pretty good at knowing what this specific model can do. So that iteration loop is like the main thing that we really try and focus on.
Interesting. So do you track the prompts in your database as well?
So all of this is actually running locally, no databases. So you can actually, as a developer, Command C, Command R, it's all running in VS Code, no extra network calls, because adding latency to a latency-based system,
Yeah.
latency sounds a little scary to me.
Yeah, I was just wondering because it might be interesting just to track what, as you say, like reprompting and stuff. You do it often, you get better at it. Like what what would be the best prompts to use, I suppose. So if the
So we
system
do
could,
have a way to collect all that data and help you
yeah,
analyze it, and like we'll release something, I think,
okay,
soon that'll
cool.
show you all that, but not yet. What's been your experience? I'm guessing you've been using these models now for a while. Have you built things using these models as like an end-to-end application yet?
Nothing yet. I actually have something I'm working on right now, which is maybe a next generation content platform for a new company I'm starting. Yeah,
That's
I think it's
speak
an
for
exciting
everyone.
time to be building. I think for a lot of reasons. Yeah, I mean, so I've ended up using it a lot to build out, code for workshops, for example, right? Because I do those often.
It's great at that.
Oh yeah, I mean, this I had to spin up this gnarly Docker container and dev container, and that would have taken me a bit, right? Because I mean, Docker a bit rusty, and it's one of those things you're not normally doing it all day. At least I'm not. So yeah, I think what would have taken me probably a week of development took 2 hours, and that's 400 lines of code. It's great, and and a lot of checks and stuff that I probably would have just missed. And so that was cool to do that. Across multiple languages. I think what UV, Python, Java, right? So that was cool. But then, that definitely got the wheels turning in terms of, okay, so like a platform, like what would it take just to build something? And I think also what I'm really excited about is not just having it help me write code, but also help architect a system, right? So how would you approach this problem here, and so forth. So I think it's fun. It's fun. I mean,
Yeah,
it brings the fun back to programming.
you get rid of all the boring stuff and you only work on the parts you like because the AI model does all the boring things, like making a Docker container.
Yeah, yeah, right. Like I was just not looking forward to doing that. I've done it in the past. I was like, I do not want to deal with this. And it just did it all for me. I mean, it had to reprompt a bunch. I mean, and I think this is one of the things, I'd love your opinion on, but because I think before we were talking, before we hit record, just the nature of programming when AI is maybe producing 90% of the code. My impression is you do need to know what to look for. Like if I just sort of blindly let it say, okay, just like build me something
Yeah,
cool.
you can't do it.
Yeah, you look at the code and you're just like, that's off. That doesn't seem right. Like that's a hallucination. Like that package, like that version that you just put in there is like completely made up. Um,
I think I think there's a couple of things around CodeGen when it comes to models that is true. One of them is one, the models are getting better, like week over week, or maybe not week over week, like a couple month over month. They're getting it better for
easy.
sure at CodeGen. And code, I think, will be one of the first problems to be solved. That said, I don't think code can be solved. And not because the models can't write beautiful code, just because code is complex, it's nuanced, and the needs evolve over time. And it's what I found is like if I'm starting a greenfield project, even as a developer, let's ignore models. I feel like I'm so fast. I write code at lightning speed. And then and then I've been coding this thing for a while. Like BAML now is like a couple 100,000 lines of code, right? And it's all Rust. So at the beginning, it was super fast. We're just like stripping through code. But now we add features. Like we have to remember the intricacies of things. It's not just like an implementation problem. It's like the design is half in our heads and half in the code. And there's like a source of truth that is actually the code, but the code has bugs. It's not always a perfect source of truth. It has unintentional things in it. And every piece of software will, for the end of time, have those things encoded in it because you will not address every use case that you have permanently in day one. So like the model world is going to have the same problems.
Absolutely. And you mentioned design earlier. I mean, I'm sure that you have a sense of design for BAML in you and your co-founders' heads, like what it should be. It's probably not in the model.
Yeah, exactly. And like we can try and articulate it to the model, but like the code will just never reflect that perfectly. And like we've done this many times where like every single time we start a project, we definitely use AI. And it's great because the prototype is working, everything is working nicely. But the point where it falters is when we start having to do more nuanced changes. And then we look at the code that it generated in more detail. And we're like, oh my God, it's suddenly slower for me to modify this because it made a couple bad design choices. And then you get stuck in this prompting loop where you're trying to fix the design choices that it made, but it can't do that yet because the models are not today good enough. And then you're just like, oh, I wasted like 2 days doing this when I could just written it since I knew what I was doing. And that balance is just a balance that like every programmer has to fight for the end of time.
That's a common complaint that I'm hearing from developers, especially senior ones, where it's great for prototyping. When it gets to a level of complexity where you're having to connect the dots, it doesn't do that well yet.
We have some fun coincidental side effects of using Rust. One, the models are bad at Rust unless you really prompt them correctly with like perfect Rust terminology.
Interesting.
So it's really hard to get a model to output bad Rust code. So that helps. The other thing is we actually on a team don't generally use the models to write a lot of like large features. We use it more like autocomplete. It's like, hey, I know what this feature is. There's like a small bug. I can help you go fix that. And it's great for that. It's great for refactoring kind of use cases as well. But then what we say is like for our front ends and websites, we let the model go ham. We're like that stuff is low risk. It's easy to fix. It has like a TypeScript base, so a lot of errors can get caught up front and when the model does it wrong. And it's backed by our database, which is built in Rust. So like that interface is super tight.
Yeah.
But it's really useful to be able to iterate really fast. I think finding the balance of that. And then we do not let AI run on our doc. Docs are like no AI.
Why is that?
Because we're a dev tool. The syntax is our product. The documentation is our product. And no matter how good the models are, they're not good enough to compete with the best engineers today. And it is important that the engineers workshop ideas directly as themselves and an authentic voice comes out. It shouldn't feel like a model wrote the docs.
Right.
Like we wrote the docs. And the model will get details wrong. We're a new programming language. It's like no matter how we prompt it, it will get some details wrong. So we have to make sure the docs are perfect and immaculate. And we still get it wrong sometimes too, but less than the models.
Let me look at your docs real quick.
Docs.boundaryml.com. I think if you look up BAML now, we used to be like never on the page because BAML stands for Bank of America Merrill Lynch.
Yeah,
but now we're ranked 2 on GitHub. Yeah, so rank 2. I do strive for the day when we can take over Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Philosophically, I am against paying for ads because like I think the true nature of it should stand true. So like hopefully one day our SEO will be better than Bank of America Merrill Lynch. But I'll settle for number 2.
That's awesome. I mean, DBT had that problem for a bit. If you know DBT, the data packaging, I think dialectic behavioral therapy, I think was what DBT stood for a long time. And I think finally they broke through
yeah, they're number one
that Wikipedia page. Yeah, it took a while though. I think a lot of people were very confused. They're like, this doesn't seem like a data tool. I don't need help in this area. Thank you.
Lucky part is I don't think we'll get sued because it's open source.
Well, it's not like competitive either.
Exactly. It's like Bank of America is not a programming language. There's like zero chance of confusion there.
You never know. I mean, it might make you popular if you do get sued.
I would actually welcome being sued by Bank of America.
I was going to say, the PR, you should go for it, man. Just egg them on.
You're right. I should just tweet at them every time. Can you please give me the handle? Can you please give me the handle? Every day.
Man, it's yeah, your docs are good. They're clean.
They could be better, but we did spend like a good amount of time making it usable. And like we've had thousands of people now onboard onto BAML and started using it in production. And it's really just about, and that uptick definitely coincided with the docs.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I always look at is the installation docs, because if you can't get that right, it's like nothing else matters. But it seems very clean. Yeah, you're right. It has a bit of personality to it. That's good. Um, I'm looking for if it says like in conclusion because that would be an LLM writing it. I'm just kidding. Like,
That is actually true though. Like there's these signals that we all have. I get like LinkedIn ads from people, and I can just tell when it's an LLM that wrote that message on their behalf or like
mm,
email intros. I'm like, I can tell that you're an LLM, and I'm like not interested in like being a part of your mass spam software.
yeah. Well, even you have to catch yourself when you're writing language, like English, for example, right? Like I found myself using the word delve the other day. I was like, shit, if I use that, somebody's gonna think I use an LLM for this, right? So you use like different words now.
Well, I think the trick there is you can just be bad at spelling like myself and just spell common words totally wrong. And then people are like, there's no way an LLM is that dumb.
No, I think you're going to start seeing imperfections intentionally.
But yeah, the models will be trained to do that.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Grammarly is interesting. I mean, I use it to polish up gross grammatical errors, which I commit a lot of sins on. I think being a professional writer, I would have grammar nailed out, but not even a lot of writers I know don't. Like, grammar is just one of those things you either get it or you don't. But Grammarly, I try and avoid it 50% of the time because it otherwise steers your voice into something that sounds very Grammarly-ish, and
It's like
that's
average. It gets to the average voice, not your voice.
yeah, exactly. So you got to like put random stuff in there. It does a
I
good job
remember.
overall, though. Yeah, but it's yeah. I think you're right though with the docs because I was wondering about that the other day, like how like who was it? My friend Hannes Moyes, and he created DuckDB, and in his docs we're hanging out and he's writing the Avro extension for that. Which, by the way, he doesn't use AI for anything. He's just sitting there like writing C. He's
That's
like
the right
the
way to
dude's
do
a
it.
G. Yeah, it's like it's cool. But then the the personality part of it, where it comes out in the documentation, is like you can only read Avro. We don't believe that there more Avro files should exist in the world. So that's funny.
That is it. I think that's like, and I think it also resonates with developers. Like you're just bored reading docs, and like it's like, can you just give me a? You laugh a little. It just makes you like the product.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and something like yours, where the name, it stands for a couple things. I think that gives it some personality. Like I saw that and I was like, okay, this is fun. I'm probably gonna try it over the weekend just because it looks dope.
That's cool. Yeah,
Yeah, it
we've
looks fun.
seen. I remember like when we applied to YC for the first time, or not, I guess the fourth time. When I applied, he I put there's some part of the application like tell me something that you know that other people don't know, and I put a blur that's like standard. But I remember I put a enter. I put some spaces and I write also wombat shit cubes because the shape of the poop of wombats is a cubical shape, and
Oh,
like
I
it's
didn't even
one
know that.
fact exactly, and like it's things like that that I don't even know if it helped us get in or not, but I'm pretty sure someone smiled. I don't know if they smiled or not, but someone smiled when they read that. And if you're going through like hundreds or thousands of applications and one of them makes you smile, it's just like it just gives you 0.5% chance of being. I mean, the content still has to be somewhat not totally bad, but I think a smile really goes a long way in a lot of products.
Oh, it does. It does. I can only imagine going through the applications for YC.
I would never like bestow that on anyone.
I'm sure there's some good ideas you come across. I'm sure you come across some cool people, but for every one of those, I'm guessing I've never done it, but it seems like it would just be a sea of sameness in a lot of cases where it's like,
Yeah,
cool,
it's like
another
any.
AI startup, awesome.
I mean, it's like the same as any interview process. Like when I was at Google and you go through the interviews, you as an interviewee, I definitely it feels so transactional and so like inauthentic. But then when you get to the interviewer side, at the same time, you're like, oh, I have to talk to this person and this person and this person, and this is my Tuesday, and I'm not getting work done this Tuesday, and I'm gonna have to report to stand up. I got nothing done because I had interviews, but it's like, and then 90% of the people I talk to don't meet the bar, so I'm now getting like more negative signal than positive signal, and I don't know
Right.
how to change that process because I think there must be some way to make it more positive for everyone involved. But it's just like not a fun loop ever. You go through hundreds of people to find one.
Yeah.
Like I can't imagine.
What was that experience like? Sounds like you applied to YC a few times and finally got in. But
But yeah,
what were the first companies? Because you said you pivoted a lot. Were these different
oh,
pivots, or was this the same company
no,
each
no,
one?
no. So the first time I applied was in 2013. I was back in college as a sophomore, and I applied to YC. I remember I applied with a friend, And at that point, the name of the company was called No Prick, which is not a good name. No one should call the company No Prick. It was like a non-invasive glucose monitor. So the idea
Wait,
was
no prick?
it was
Nope.
literally called No Prick because you
Jesus Christ.
except exactly exactly. I was I was like 20 and I thought it was such a good name. It was not close. But YC didn't do biotech back then. So we did get to the interview. They flew us out, and at the end, I was like, "Why did you fly us out if you don't do biotech? I don't understand." I did that, and then I applied a couple of years later with another company. I got the interview for that one, but we didn't get any. Oh, and then I applied a couple of years later with a coding boot camp kind of idea, like an online education field for code, but more paid. So like Coursera, but more modularized and more paid. That didn't get the interview. Then I applied again with my current co-founder to an idea regarding Twitch ads, like interactive ads on Twitch. And I thought this was sick. I've showed this demo. I'll post the YouTube video later if you want. I'll send it to you. And it was so cool. I was like, every time I showed this to them, they're like, "Oh, this could be a company." And I remember in the interview, Michael Seibel, who was one of the co-founders of Twitch, asked us a question of like, "Have you ever seen another $1 billion business built on Twitch?" And our answer was like, "No." He's like, "Why do you think this will be it?" And like we gave some standard fluff answer. And then at the end of it, he was like, "Hey, do you guys even watch Twitch?" And the answer was like, "No, we did not watch Twitch. We're just like two 30-year-olds that are doing this." But we obviously didn't say that. And we genuinely believed we watched Twitch at the time when we were not part of Twitch culture. That interview ended in 6 minutes. It was supposed to last 10.
It's rough.
Yeah, that hurt my soul more than any amount of rejection I've gotten in my life. I was like, this was like at this point, me and my co-founder were pretty senior engineers. So like we had like, I don't know, you build a little bit of confidence about being decent at something. And we were working with a couple of Twitch streamers, and like now the co-founder of Twitch just like tells you no. Like flat out no, doesn't even justify the rest of the 4 minutes, just says, "Okay, we're done here," and just like shuts down the call.
Do you think it might have been because you were kind of intruding on his turf in some ways? Or,
No, I think he was right. We didn't
well, he
watch
was
Twitch.
right. I'm not disputing
Yeah.
it, but maybe it's extra hard news. It's like, do you know what this is about?
Yeah, maybe the language he used could have been nicer, but honestly, I think as senior engineers, we needed to hear it in that way. Just a really
Yeah,
firm, strong no. And that was personally very useful and insightful to us. I remember both of us independently stayed up the whole night. Aaron does this thing. He writes his thoughts down. I just start thinking. We both wake up at like 7 a.m. We're like, "Oh, are you up yet?" And we're both like, "Yeah." Neither of us slept, and we just talk all day long about like how that went down, how do we pivot, how do we change things. We emailed them of like, "You're right. This isn't gonna work. Here's our new draft of what we're gonna pivot towards." And we did all of that. It was still in the game tech space in the creator economy. We didn't get in, but I think it was the signal for me that me and Aaron love working together above all things.
yeah, something like that would do it.
And then after that, we actually started working on a bunch of other ideas. That was
Did you
pivot
come
number
up with
four.
your Slack competitor after that? Because I know Slack came out of a video game company, so
Yeah. So we did. What did we do after that one? We did Twitch ads. Then we did like a multiplayer SDK. Like how do you build multiplayer games in a really nice way? Then we did something for the creator economy because my co-founder used to be a YouTuber. So we're like, how can we help creators? Like the idea was, what if I could back my favorite creators before they get big and get a percentage of their income? Really cool concept, horrible in practice for a lot of reasons. And like crypto was big at the time, so like maybe there's crypto fund. We're like crypto's so dumb, but like I don't know, maybe people want this because it's. And I'm so glad we didn't do that. We spent 1 week and we're like, this is absurd. Then we did like HR tech, like surveys for like internal companies, and we're like, and then Amazon. Aaron was just like, I didn't quit my job to go build a survey company, so we moved out of that, which is really valid. I was like, I don't want to be a survey company 5 years from now. Then we did the Slack competitor, and we applied to YC with that. And that YC interview, I remember, went something like, "We like you guys. You guys clearly like working together, but will you pivot your idea?" And that's the question they asked in the interview. And I remember saying something along the lines of like, "Yes, if we get the data." The most absurd thing about that statement is like, at that point, we had 400 people use our Slack app and churn. We had 2 people that didn't churn. Like we had the data, we just refused to look at it in the eye with the signal that we had. We're like, oh, if we had like 3 more features, it'll be there. And like, oh, it's such a mistake. We did pivot like 4 months later, um, into like more of the AI space, because what we found is in the YC batch, and that was winter 23. So that was the batch after ChatGPT came out. It was like the first AI batch. Now every batch is forever going to be an AI batch for a while. But like that was the first AI batch. And what we found is everyone was constantly asking us a lot of questions about like how do these models work? And we just having worked in engineering for a while in machine learning, we were able to describe these more nuanced concepts to people. So we said, why don't we just go into the ML space? And Dalton, the partner's like, yeah, find out the space you like. And then we tried a whole bunch of things. We tried like automated drive-throughs. We tried. I remember driving to Taco Bell to like 3 p.m. trying to get them to use our tech. And I was like, I love Taco Bell. Maybe I'll get them to use that. And then we did a couple more ideas. And like 8 or 9 months, 8 months after the batch ended, then we finally were like, okay, the thing that we think is going to work is a programming language. And everyone said no to this idea too, by the way, because again,
It's hard.
it's hard to imagine. It's
Yeah.
even hard to imagine as a concept. But then about 7 months after building, we finally started being like, we had users be like, holy cow, for the first time. And then we had the at first it took us like 5 months to get every one user. I remember it was like it takes forever to be like we went from like 3 people using it to like 4 in like a month. And I was like, oh my God, that felt so good to get that fourth person.
Yeah.
And I don't mean teams, I mean people. And then we went from 4 to 5 in like another month. And then we went from 5 to 8 in the next month. And it was like, it was just so slow. But eventually we had some of the stuff figured out, not everything. And
Yeah.
then we started seeing like wider adoption.
How did you know that adoption was starting to tick up in a way where you're like, this
We did
is,
it.
you didn't? Okay.
Yeah, it would be foolish of me to admit any other thing. But I think a startup is about measuring your wins. And the
Yeah.
time, I think a winning startup isn't one that's winning. It's just that the time between wins gets shorter. Right. So like now we have someone new joining the Discord almost every day. Right. And that's exciting. That means like people are, and we suck at SEO. I should probably ask you how to do this kind of stuff. We don't really know how to do that well, but like somehow the content is getting out there and someone looks at it and says, interesting, and clicks join Discord. It's not a great signal, but it's a signal that like there's something of value that people are going to devote some amount of their notification space to it.
I think there's a couple things. Like I just started a Discord group myself, because why not?
Yeah, exactly. Why not?
I mean, everyone does. Yeah, I think so. There's a couple things. I think being able to get people in. So I started off with probably 100 people, and I just put it on my Substack chat, like, hey, opening this up pretty light. Maybe a few people get in. Had 100 people start out. That was cool. Then I just like, let's test this out and see if it's even worth our time to do a community. And then, made a post on LinkedIn. You got probably, I don't know, 500 people show up. Again, not that big, but it's like I'm more focusing on what are the interactions with the people and are people, if I just step away from the shadow into the shadows and let people just talk, right? This isn't about me. This is their community. Then I'm like, okay, let's see how that goes. And then it kept going. It's self-running, self-governing. People knew the culture. And they started inviting their friends. And then that, I think, was kind of all it was. I did a LinkedIn post earlier this week, and that ticked us up for 1,000 people, which still not huge, but they conversations are awesome. And I just, I actually inducted 2 mods for it, and so they can help run it too. But I think it's just one of those things where you're to get people in. It's really about having a community where people can just, I think, chat on their own. So that's what I would do. If it's a good community, then people will show up. If it's a shitty community, nobody's going to show up.
Exactly.
It's pretty easy.
Right now we're trying to bootstrap it. So we have a couple hundred people, and we're trying to bootstrap it. Like anytime someone asks a question in BAML, my goal is someone on the team responds within like an hour. Our response rate right now is like, I think I measured 2024. I think 57% of our messages went in under 5 minutes.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's just like being obsessed about that. And now we have other people in the community starting to answer questions as well and like link to other threads. I'm like, okay, that is starting to feel kind of.
That's when I think you've made it. Where if other people are doing it, and that's because that's a community, right? I think it's the key of it, where the members themselves are now participating, and like that's like DBT did a really good job with this with their Slack community. Fantastic job. I think it was like 20,000 something people, right? Community is bigger than that, probably. Yeah, it's great.
To be honest, like LangChain has done a really good job with this too.
Oh, I haven't seen theirs.
Really competitor. So their Discord is not as good, but their Reddit is really good. a lot
Mm,
of people are asking like prompting and AI based problems, and it's like a great place to ask questions.
that's cool.
So it's like it's interesting to actually see how other companies have like strived to build not just their personal brand, but a place for people to share certain types of ideas. And that's it, what I think you were alluding to about like the community you built.
That's really the essence of the community. Like your name, your brand's going to get people in, perhaps, but it's also the brand is also the nature of the conversations and the quality of the conversations. It's not just, I'm in the BAML Discord group. It's
Exactly.
like it just happens to be where the good conversation on these particular niche topics are. And I feel like anymore, like the days of like mass communities is, I think, coming to a swift end. I think people want niche stuff.
Yeah, I want like hyper personalized content. That's exactly what I want
Yeah,
in the level of depth that I care about.
yeah, exactly. And then yeah, so I think you're on the right path. Really, it's I mean, there's no secret. I mean, it's all about quality these days. Because if you want quantity, like you can just mass produce AI shill and put that online, and
Okay,
and
yeah,
that's gonna go
I'm
nowhere.
just so worried about the internet when that happens. Like it's already starting to happen, but like I think kids are actually going to be the best detectors of AI out of
Yeah.
everyone else. Because like the iteration loop I was talking about, the kids today are building like iteration loops at a young age. They're starting to build iteration loops at like the age of 5 or 10.
Oh yeah.
And like by the time they're like 20, they'll know it's like this is AI generated, this is not. This is good AI, this is bad AI.
No, my
I think
oldest
they'll
son, he'll see an image and he'll be like, "That's AI."
exactly.
Like it
Exactly.
is
Like they
for
just
sure.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I think it's gonna matter to be authentic. So
Oh yeah, big time, big time. And I think that's you're doing the right things. Just keep doing it. Like have inject your personality into stuff. And this is we're turning into the advice podcast, but whatever. It's like for the audience out there, be a person.
I think the only advice I've gotten from YC is just don't die. And that's like the only thing. Like do whatever it takes to not die. And then the rest of it you'll figure it out, but just don't die.
Like as a company or as a person? I guess probably both.
Both. Yeah, it's a really good advice.
Awesome. Four applications and you got basically
Yeah,
don't die.
4 applications over 10 years.
Vaibhav, it's been great chatting with you. For people who want to learn more about what you're up to, how can they find you?
The easiest way is you can look me up on LinkedIn, Vaibhav Gupta. If you look up Google or Boundary, you'll probably find me. And then, or you can just go to search BAML on Google and find link number 2 on there. And that will take you to all the links you might need, including our Discord and our Docs page and our homepage.
Awesome. Well, thanks a bunch, man. Hopefully,
Yeah.
see you
Thanks for
around.
having me.
So, yeah, of course,
Totally fun.
anytime.
I'll see you around at future conferences.
Yeah.
See you, Joe.